Alright, hey friends, we're back with our 50 State Cryptid series. Today we're going to be talking about the Enfield horror from Illinois. So, I'm excited for this one. It's a bit of an interesting one. I did some research before the video and yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, let's get right into this interesting horror story. Okay, as I said before, the Enfield horror does originate from Illinois, specifically the town of Enfield, which is where it's got its name, obviously. In 1973, several Enfield, Illinois residents claimed to have seen an unidentified creature that was like just scurrying around the town. Sociologists, goodness gracious, I can't speak English, were very quick to dispute these claims. However, they concluded that it was nothing more than a social contagion or a little group hysteria. They weren't thinking anything of it. Once one person claimed to have seen the monster, and everybody else just started saying, "Oh yeah, I've seen it too." The Mount Vernon Register News apparently has a quote from one of the first people to have seen it. They said it had 3 legs, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights, and it stood 4.5 feet tall, and it was grayish colored. Some locals claimed that it was nothing more than an ape or a kangaroo that had escaped from a local zoo, or something of the sort, with residents from the surrounding area calling in to confirm this. One man from Ohio contacted authorities believing that what people had seen was his lost kangaroo named Macy. Several residents to this day still believe something unknown is stalking the Enfield woods. Some people think it's just an ape. Some people think that it's an actual monster, but it remains to be seen. I guess it ultimately amounts to what you're willing to believe if you're from Illinois and how far you're willing to stretch your imagination. It makes sense for a campfire story, but if you're in Enfield, I guess, I don't know, some people think that it's more than a campfire story. I don't know. But, I'm gonna read some sightings, some encounters, and then we'll talk about, if we believe this or not. So, the first encounter is from Henry Daniel, my goodness. So, here's what he says. At about 9:30 that night, McDaniel and his wife had returned home, and they were greeted by their 2 children, Lil and Henry. The kids proceeded to tell him a tale about how something had tried to get into the house by scratching at the door. Shortly thereafter, Henry was alerted to a peculiar scratching sound at his front door, like his kids had said. He expected to see a dog or a cat, but what he met instead was much stranger. What Henry found, to his terror, was a creature that had 3 legs, a short body, 2 little arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored, and it was trying to get into my house. Henry was completely mortified by the sight of this horrible abomination, slammed the door, and rushed to grab his .22 pistol and flashlight. Henry proceeded to fire on the creature 4 times, and according to him, when I fired that first shot, I knew I hit him. The beast hissed at him. Most sources say that it sounded rather more like a wildcat, but then it proceeded to bound away in long leaps across the yard, eventually becoming lost to McDaniel's sight, as it made its way toward the railroad and the cover of the trees. He asserted that he had seen the thing cover 50 feet in 3 leaps. Stunned by the encounter, Henry proceeded to call the police. Under investigation, state troopers discovered a series of scratches in the siding of the house and footprints that were very similar to a dog's, but having 6 toes instead of 4. 2 of the tracks were 4 inches wide, while the print left by the 3rd foot was smaller. Many on the police force were skeptical about what McDaniel had seen, despite having just received news of an attack on a small boy just 30 minutes earlier. The creature had ripped at the child's clothes with the claws on its arm, while the talons on its toes had shredded the kid's shoes. However, the police couldn't find any traces of the entity, so things cooled down for the moment. However, on May 6th at 3 a.m., Henry encountered the creature again after having been roused from his sleep by the commotion from his neighbor's dogs. Once again, he saw the creature littering about near the train tracks. This went on for several minutes until the entity casually bounded away into the night. McDaniel later said, "I saw something moving out on the railroad track, and there it stood. I didn't shoot at it or anything. It started on down the railroad track. It wasn't in a hurry or nothing." Then, after word of the Enfield horror had gotten around, people began to flock to the small town in hopes of seeing the thing. They were very enthusiastic, but they were also very intrusive. This prompted the local sheriff, Roy Poshard Jr., to warn McDaniel about keeping his mouth shut, or he would be forced to incarcerate McDaniel. Over the next few months, the crowd began to grow larger. With the larger crowds came increased alarm among the citizens of Enfield. Some among them were genuine monster hunters, while others were just hunters or thrill seekers with guns. This forced the sheriff's hand, particularly when he had to arrest 5 gun-toting hunters for a shoot at a gray thing that ran through the woods. 2 of those hunters, Mike Mongol and Roger Tappy, both from Elwood, Indiana. Hey, I'm from Indiana. They both swore that they had witnessed a gray monkey quickly move through the underbrush. Sheriff Poshard made numerous threats against Henry McDaniel, which, it should be noted, had no effect whatsoever, who was convinced that there was something very strange going on. Shortly thereafter, once the frenzy of hunters and tourists had died down, 4 more people evidently saw the Enfield horror. So, the next encounter is by Rick Rainbow. On Sunday, May 6th, Rick Rainbow, the then director of radio station WWKI in Kokomo, Indiana, wow, that's like really not that far from me, was searching an area with 3 friends when they saw something that was around 5.5 feet in height, gray, and stooped over, running through the woods near an abandoned house, which it was reported was nearby McDaniel's home. The entity moved with an unnatural speed and quickly vanished from the 4 men's sight. However, Rick Rainbow claimed to have recorded the creature's eerie shriek as it ran away from them on a tape recorder. Despite investigation by the world-renowned cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman, who is said to have heard the creature's cries herself, the attention that the sightings received eventually died down, and the creature hasn't been seen since. Lauren told the press, "I traveled to Enfield, interviewed the witnesses, looked at the sighting of the house the Enfield monster had damaged, heard some strange screeching banshee-like sounds, and walked away bewildered." There has also been some sightings of something called the Mount Vernon creature, which is apparently very similar to the Enfield horror and could be the same, potentially. So, between the years of 1941 and 1942, there was a similar string of sightings in the small village of Mount Vernon, which happens to be less than 40 miles away from Enfield. Another reason why it could be the same thing. These encounters involved a mysterious leaping beast that terrorized the local people and is supposedly responsible for numerous animal deaths and mutilations in the region. The locals called the creature the Mount Vernon monster and described it as being vaguely baboon-like in appearance and able to leap anywhere from 20 to 40 feet in a single bound. However, this creature is likened more to the devil monkey than the Enfield monster, but it is possible that it was in fact the same creature. So, this was an interesting one. I feel more entitled to believe this one for some reason than others. I feel like it's the fact that at the end, I found that thing about the Mount Vernon monster, which just so happens to be not that far from Enfield, but I feel like far enough to where they wouldn't just be copying. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. This one seems just more believable just because the accounts of Mount Vernon and Enfield were so similar, but not exactly the same, which makes me believe they're not copying each other, because if they were, then they would just say the exact same things that the people in Enfield did. But, I don't know. If anyone is from Illinois and has heard of this monster, let me know in the comments if you've had any experiences or stories. I'm from Indiana, but I've never actually heard of the Enfield horror. But, yeah, let me know if you guys have ever heard of this, if you have any other facts and research you've done. I don't know. Next week is actually going to be Indiana. We're going to Indiana, which is, as I've said millions of times, where I am from. But I've never actually heard of this creature before. It's called the Beast of Busco. So it'll be interesting to learn about something that's from my home state that I've never actually heard of. But to be fair, I've never really heard of any Indiana-specific cryptids or legends. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, it'll be interesting. So hope you guys enjoyed the Enfield horror, and I'll see you next week for the Beast of Busco. I've never felt this way before, and now I know this all for sure.